Have you noticed that in the new Heart of Heaven map in Marvel Rivals, the offense tends to win more often than not? That's not an accident. In fact, there's a lot of strange design decisions that make the Heart of Heaven one of the most unique maps in the game, and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to analyze the map flow design as well as some of the art within the new Heart of Heaven map. I want to start with some of the art because it is absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, all of Marvel Rivals maps look great, but this one in particular has a beautiful aesthetic. One of the very first things I decided to do with my spectator camera, as my two Jeffs decided to go at it with each other, is I noticed that these animals down here are actually fully 3D modeled. Now, that might seem odd to point out, but Rivals does a pretty good job of cutting corners in areas that we won't really notice. In fact, we're going to see them cut corners on this map later in the video that I guarantee you did not notice. This area down here, for some reason, they decided to go the extra mile. Mostly. The cranes are still floating a little bit. The next thing I noticed is the volumetric fog that is met right at the door. Now, the thing that makes this odd is that there is no door here. Now, you aren't crazy. You're not just holding yourself back because you've been Pavloved into believing there's a door there. There is obviously something stopping you, but the door is fully invisible. The first time on a map that has done this. I've noticed this because I always try to take a look at where the door ends up going to, and I have no idea. The door just is gone. As we immediately exit these doors, if you slow down, you can actually notice the right-hand side, there are these pandas over here. These actually do make little crunching noises, which is very cute. There's actually quite a lot of them back here, as well as this, I guess, a nursery for a character that I let you guys in the comments, guess about this one. There's also cats on the left-hand side, which again, in the heat of combat, I doubt anybody ever took the time to stop and notice these, but they're cute and they're fun. So let's actually examine this first exit point, because this is the first time we start to see how this map is designed to favor the offense or the defense arbitrarily. The devs get to decide who wins what game, or at least heavily stack the deck in their favor. This area here off of the offense's initial push is designed asymmetrically. There are 3 points that they can generally assault from before it is funneled to pretty much a single point. They can either go right where the pandas are, down the center, jumping through the fog, which is a little dangerous, but something they can do. There's a health pack down there for them too. Or they can go to the left, which is what the path actually recommends you do. And kind of so do I, because this left-hand side has a much longer line of sight and allows the team to get fully set up and established before pushing in. Now, that alone wouldn't really be enough to recommend taking a particular side, but if you were to try to take the right-hand side, which might make sense if you've got a close range hero where you can kind of close the gap a little bit easier, there is a much bigger distance between where you're going to get your next piece of cover. The left-hand side has the option, if necessary, to take a flanking route up and around, or use some of the rocks and pillars that are up here to protect yourself if need be, something that doesn't rely on your tank to have a shield. But the right-hand side is a big gap before finally allowing you to land in a corridor that has an even further distance to a high ground than what would be to just simply walk straight towards the point. In other words, this right-hand side is clearly designed with the defense in mind, as they're going to have the time to actually get set up and set a longer ranged hero up here to rain down fire into that funnel down below. The defense can also hang out on this upper roof that looks straight down, forcing any melee or brawl-based heroes to spend their movement abilities to get up to them, or just try to ignore them or switch characters. That left-hand side doesn't really favor the offense either, because the distance to actually get finally in a position where you can properly flank is also further than what it would be if you were to just simply walk to the point. Now, that's to be expected up to a point, but not quite this far. Not only that, but as the defense is funneling back, they're going to be crashing directly behind you, basically completely forfeiting any sort of flanking position you had if you stay there for any length of time whatsoever. So you've made it past the first point, you've captured the turtle, and now he's starting to move. The waterfall here actually clears up a bit. You might not have noticed this, but this waterfall goes from pretty much completely opaque to something you can actually see through. My curiosity begged me to take a look and see what was up at the top of this, and yeah, not to be surprised, there's pretty much nothing up here. But we do get to see these 2D trees. Now, these 2D trees are a little unusual in that they always face you. They're kind of reminiscent of the old Nintendo 64 style of kind of selling you on the idea of 3D without it actually being 3D. Now, this could just be easily wrote off as just a strange technique to cut down on polygons, but I don't know of any other Marvel Rivals maps that do this. Typically, they just use a more static 2D PNG. So definitely odd to see. Obviously, there's some stuff up here that we're not supposed to see, but we do get to see some of the, I guess, divine beasts that are scattered around the skybox here, all of which we've actually seen in the event page that actually gave us the Ultron skin. Probably many of you have already finished it up to this point. This first checkpoint, this first push, is really, really unfair. Now, the defense had the favor on point 1. I guess you could say that it was sort of what you'd expect, so maybe it's more equal footing, right? But this point, objectively speaking, is really favoring the offense, which is likely why you've probably never ended a game right here. Offense is expected to have the advantage in terms of the distance between their spawn point and the payload for the first half of the payload push. It just makes sense. As the payload gets closer to the defense has a shorter run back, the offense has a longer run back. At some point during that push, the favor switches generally towards the defense, and there's a bit of a catch before the offense presumably eventually overtakes them or whatnot, right? But no, that's not the case here. Because this area is designed like a loop-de-loop, almost like an American freeway on-ramp, and it has the left-hand side of that loop opened up with a short path to the offensive spawn room. That means that pretty much for the entire time of this push, the offense is never more than maybe 40 meters from the payload at its absolute worst. The furthest point that the offense will ever get to the payload is maybe 25% of the way in, at which point it starts marching back towards in the direction of the offense. Now, from the defense's point of view, they have two options. They can either go to the right-hand side and meet the payload where it's at, underneath the bridge, or they can go the left-hand side and go over the top of the bridge and try to meet the offense that way. I generally recommend that you try to go the left-hand side because going into the right-hand side is kind of playing into the offense's hands. The payload is going to march towards the offense in that area, and while it is the shorter distance, there's literally no advantage in that spot. There's barely any cover, and you're always going to be chasing the payload down, which is not what you want to be doing as the defensive team. Going over on the left-hand side at least allows you multiple flank routes. You can either go into the fog that's on the right-hand side of the bridge and fire down below, try to get a flank on the team by going off the left-hand side of the bridge, or just simply meet the offense where they are on the opposite side of the bridge. But the offense still has more tricks up their sleeves, because once the payload has gotten past this halfway mark on this first push, they have the option of taking this route up into the left. This route up here offers some high ground and some cover for them to reestablish themselves. Also down here is a health pack, which I never noticed down here. A very useful one to know about. I absolutely recommend grabbing this one because it's going to be maybe 5 feet from the payload at one point. The payload will eventually get to the point where it is over on the top of the bridge. Now, at that point, it is up to the offense to try to either use movement abilities to jump up to the bridge or just simply take the quick walk to the left-hand side to go up and behind it. Assuming the offensive team doesn't have a whole lot of mobility, the tables begin to turn here a little bit. But let's assume that that point is now captured and the payload continues to move on. Now the shift begins to happen where the defense finally is in the driver's seat again. Let's take a moment to take a look at some of the details that are around here. You might have noticed this medallion if you're on the defensive team. This medallion actually shows some of the seasonal art that has been through Marvel Rivals different seasons. It will slowly swap between all of them, as well as I believe some of their series art that is the optional stuff that you can get on the side. Some of them I don't remember or recognize, but it's been a while. Taking the cameras around even further, for some reason the dragon back here is fully 3D modeled as well, which again, it's so far away I don't think anybody would have noticed if it was just a 2D thing, similar to how the trees operated. But again, for some reason they decided to make this 3D and the shrine, the housing underneath him 2D. It's a strange choice to make this happen, but you know what? It kind of works. Unsurprisingly, if we take our camera into the back areas out here where no player can go, there's nothing out here. Clearly the devs never intended us to see any of this. There's lots of holes into the void and so on and so forth, just completely bare single pane inside interiors and such. But let's talk about this in terms of the strategy. Now, offense at this point finally has a more straight standard run back. They don't really have a whole lot of options if they actually do want to put pressure on the payload. They pretty much just have to follow it, which is really exposed. Now, grant you, there's cover to the left and right, and they can obviously use whatever the defense has, assuming they can get that far. But for the vast majority of this final push, it's pretty much just open street, which means that the defense finally has the ability to use a little bit of standard tactical advantage to start to win. Firstly, the defense has a lot of options they can choose. On the far right hand side, there's even a health pack out here, which again, I've never seen before, but even ignoring that, you can use these as flanking routes to get deep into the back of the offensive line before they even recognize what's happening. There's also plenty of little pieces of high ground that if you're a ranged character, you can take advantage of. Plenty of things in the sky for the flyers to use as cover, and the left-hand side operates as a great way for any sort of close-range characters such as flankers or brawlers to get in and deal big damage, as there's a lot of this volumetric fog that now suddenly is starting to favor the defense, where it has up to this point been heavily favoring the offense. The shrine in the middle is absolutely packed with fog. There's not a lot of cover in there. However, there is a health pack just outside of it, which a lot of your fighting is going to be revolving around. And this corner right here is generally the offense's last final push. If the offense can't maintain momentum from here all the way to the end, they're probably going to lose, because once this gets up those final stairs and into what is effectively a bowl, the defense has a great time holding them here. Can they still lose? Yes, absolutely. But it's going to be much, much, much harder for them to do so. If you guys enjoyed this analysis, let me know. I also found out that you can rotate the camera like this. That's dizzying. I feel sick. Subscribe, bless your faces, and deuces.